Nigeria's 220 million people are spread across the country. And this was a problem that started with the British, even before Nigeria's independence. All right? For political purposes, Nigeria's first census is believed to have been massively compromised. All right? So, as it stands, the northern part of the country is believed to have far more people. And that's because, culturally, because of the embrace of Islam and other cultural factors, an average northerner can have, several wives, lots of children. Down south, Southerners have embraced different people. So every Southerner will have one monogamist, and sometimes he has fewer children than the Northerners would have. So for that reason alone, those who argue that there are more people up north than down south will have justification. But those of us who have preferred solutions, or what we believe are solutions to the problems we believe that you need to do an unbiased head count so that you know exactly how many people are in the country, so you can properly plan and develop the country. Now, I'll take you to, before we jump into the problems here, this slide, by the way, is from a paper, one of the papers I presented a while back here in the university, but I have to adapt it for this purpose. So I have cut off sections of it just to make sure it's a little more relevant to this audience. Now, a little bit of history for you before we jump into the book, so you can get a sense of where some of the problems confronting Nigeria today are coming from. Now, historically, Nigeria was a collection of multiple tribal and language groups. Now, the British came to the country to do business, as they did in many other parts of the world. They found that it was massive and it was very rich. Now, for administrative reasons, to enable them more efficiently run the territory so they can extract raw materials, they cobbled together, all right, the southern part that I have, that I just showed you now, and our brothers up north. Essentially, the country was divided down that line. Now they just brought everything together. These guys, these guys, these guys. And it was called the amalgamation in 1914. Now, understand that as of this period, many Nigerians were unaware of the true implications of that arrangement. And some scholars have argued that the arrangement itself was not done in the best interest of them, but that's not the core of what we're talking about here. What's important was that the British did that, and they did it because they wanted to more efficient run such a huge. They have made an experiment like that in other places, including India, and they felt, okay, this would work here, so let's try it. So they put it together, and it became a country. Nigeria became more politically aware, and towards the late 40s and early 50s, the agitation for independence, took on a greater dimension. And then after the Second World War in 1945, as Nigerians who participated in that war were coming back home, and the British Empire had been significantly weakened by that war, and its ability to more effectively keep that together was called to question. Nigerian nationalists like Nnamdi Azikiwe or Bafemi Awolowo, Sir Herbert Macaulay, were springing up. Up north, we had Ahmadu Bello, the Sadra of Sokoto, and all of that. So eventually the British yielded. And in 1960, they gave Nigeria self-rule, independence, all right, flag independence. So the British monarch ceased to be Nigeria's head of state. Nigeria now had a president and a prime minister, effectively adopting the British state. A few years down the line, you have political rancor, ethnic rivalry, a lot of problems. There was a coup, January 1966. and a counter coup in July 1966. The events of that coup eventually snowballed into a very violent civil war. As a matter of fact, that's the first televised civil conflict in modern history. That's the first time from anywhere essentially children from the southeastern corner. In that war, the Igbo and some of the other occupying this portion of the country sought to establish a country called Ghana. The rest of the country, under British advice, felt that no, that should not be allowed to happen, and it led to the civil war. At the end of the day, the numbers differ, but official figures are over 1 million people perished, mostly on the Biafran side. All right. Now, I touched on that to give you a sense of what we are now jumping into, which is the essence of this lecture. That war, as with most wars, the geopolitical. As a matter of fact, some British scholars argue that to this day, those who won the Nigerian war or the Nigerian Civil War continue to determine who governs Nigeria. It doesn't really matter what happens in the electoral field. There is, once there's a consensus amongst the victors of that, by the victors, I mean the generals, basically from the northern part of the country, and then the southwestern part, also the middle, all right? The one that, so they set a template of governance, and a country that had so much promise, a country that as of 1966 was projected to be a world by 1985. Just about 10 years from that projection, all right, fell into the grip of rent seekers, individuals who had no business governing the country. And ultimately, the country also discovered oil in the Niger Delta, a place called Eleme. And with the discovery of oil, reason flew out the window. We became totally overdependent on that product. There was no attempt to develop other sectors of the economy, agriculture, technology, even the human resources. Everything was now, let's mine oil and export. Now, with that overdependence, of course, for those of you who are economists, Nigeria's economy became vulnerable to the external shocks of the global economy. So oil goes up, Nigeria is happy. Oil goes down, Nigeria is sad. When the price of, as a matter of fact, for those of you who saw during COVID, when the price of oil went negative, there was real panic in Abuja. Yes, there was the price of oil. I was looking at it on my computer. It was negative. As a matter of fact, people could give you oil and pay you some money. That's what it was. They just wanted to offload that because the cost of storage was higher than the cost of giving it to you for free. So for oil producers and countries that were heavily dependent on oil like Nigeria, it was a massive problem. It's a good thing that we made a rebound. The country has also failed to develop the real sectors of the economy, largely because of security challenges. Nigeria's arable land is about 70% of the total land mass of the country. So ideally, the country has or should have no business with hunger. If you were to deploy mechanized agriculture with modern trends in farming to try and build a huge food reserve for the entire continent, Nigeria could be the breadbasket of Africa. All right? But today, as we speak, Nigerian are unable to farm, except they pay royalties and ransom to the dreaded terrorist group known as the Boko Haram. As a matter of fact, the Boko Haram could go to a particular Nigerian community of maybe 200 people. All right? They will not everyone, they will just act everybody in the community and just take them somewhere and ask the Nigerian government to pay a ransom. And for that period, if it's 2 weeks, if it's 3 weeks, it's 4, however long, those individuals are kept for ransom is paid, productivity is destroyed. Nobody farms, nobody produces, people go hungry, and you still pay the criminals. Now, there's also banditry. Banditry in Nigeria is almost like terrorism, if you will. Now, you have these nomads, cattle rearers, mainly of the Fulani stock, but other Nigerians as well. It's not an ethnic thing. There are other Nigerians who own cattle. Now, because of the, and for those of you who are interested in climate science, this is also very relevant. Because of, changes in the climate, all right, the catastrophic impact of the weather on the Lake Chad Basin and the fact that water resources in those parts of the country are dramatically drying up, they are increasingly moving down south in order to rear their cattle in search of greener pasture, in search of water, in search of all that. Now, as they are moving down south, they are invading farming communities. All right, they go through the middle belt and they invade farming communities. There's no government arrangement to say, okay, let's organize these individuals who have to rear their cattle. Let's find a systematic way for them to do this without disrupting well-settled communities and farming. So the impact of this is what you now call banditry. The so-called bandits are actually some of these nomads coming in from Niger, Chad, and other parts of West Africa, seeing that Nigeria's borders are very porous, and they're taking advantage of it, all right, to invade several Nigerian communities as bandits. So your regular definition of bandits here might be a little bit expanded to accommodate also kidnap individuals for ransom. They don't go to these communities and rob their homes as regular thieves. They go to these communities, they kill people, and then if these communities do not have enough to pacify them, they catch people away and then they ask for ransom. And then kidnapping is big. All right? Last year, kidnappers in Nigeria were estimated to have made somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion. Last year. Now, just to put that in perspective, the size of the Nigerian economy is $250 billion. That's a massive drop from the over $500 billion that was the last quarter of 2014. So much has gone down. So that's almost half what it was about 10 years ago. But kidnappers got $1 billion from ransom, so it's a very lucrative business in the country. And if you understand the size of thank you so much. If you understand the size of the country and how porous, the borders are, and the fact that the security architecture is very weak and ineffective, you now understand why this happens. As a matter of fact, the data collection system in Nigeria is so terrible that you could commit crimes in one state and go live in another state very peacefully for a very long time. And nobody will look for you, nobody will find you. Except you continue to commit those crimes and then you're eventually captured in the act. That's how bad it is. So it's a haven for criminals. There's no advanced tracking system. Now, some cities, yes, do have, places like Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, you do have some, a semblance of cameras in selected public spaces. But the ability of Nigerian security agencies to effectively track and combat criminality is so weak that the criminals are having to field. Also, within the security establishment itself, all right, there is criminality. Now, before I came to the United States, I practiced law in the Niger Delta of Nigeria, where much of the oil comes from. And as a lawyer, one of the things you enjoy is access to classified information, right? A lot of it, either from your clients or through inspection of documents in the process of discovery, so many things. And one of the things we found, of course, we'll make statements without divulging client confidentiality. But one of the things we discovered was that those in charge of the Nigerian military, Army, the Navy, the Air Force, were deeply involved with stealing oil from the country. Oil theft is an advanced, organized business, aided, facilitated by those who are supposed to protect Nigeria's infrastructure against that sort of problem. And that is why today, almost any Nigerian president who is elected is crippled immediately he goes into office. Because the guys who are stealing oil from the oil wells of the Delta are so powerful that they can level one nation state. In 2007, the Nigerian president was forced to adopt the services of a local government known as Compolo to protect Nigeria's oil pipeline. Nigeria has a standing name. I mean, think about it. It's like recruiting a militia here in the United States to protect economic infrastructure in any American state, because the US Navy is unable to combat that militia. Now, this same individual was retained by the man who succeeded Goodluck Umar Hussein, that's President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. And when Buhari came, Buhari was Nigeria's president before Tinubu, and people thought he was, a little more forceful, and that he was going to go and dismantle him. But as I said, once he got him, and he saw how deep the infrastructure of criminality was, and that it was either you just do your own thing and pretend to people that you're president and that you're effective, or we'll fight you. He retained those individuals. And today, President Tinubu has also retained those, in fact, he has added to them. In addition to Compolo, another guy called Asari Dokubo also has contracts protecting oil pipelines. But the irony is that there is no protection. There is just division. Take a portion and declare it to the government and the well-established oil companies, then take a portion, channel them to private ships, and go and sell them off on international waters. So they are very, very powerful. As a matter of fact, the British government last year warned that any attempt to dismantle this criminal structure without careful planning could lead to the disintegration of the Nigerians. That's how powerful they are. Some estimates say that they make about, and I'm talking of the entire cartel, they make about $30 million daily, not monthly. The entire cartel, not themselves. They make about $30 million every day from stealing and selling Nigerian oil. So they're probably better armed than the Nigerian armed forces. But of course, you will never know. So that's a major challenge. And that is why we have recommended that Nigeria is going to resist all reforms. And we're going to talk more about that when we go into our solutions for this problem. Nigeria will resist reforms. Nigeria needs a fundamental overhaul. There's nothing to the reform. All right. After the current president goes, whenever he goes, we're going to come back and start talking about the same problems. And in 2012, Nigerians protested because petroleum was selling at, I think it was $187. It had been moved from about $120 to $187. Sorry, 187 naira. Naira is the Nigerian currency. So it had moved to 187 naira. Nigerians protested, and then the government pulled back and made the increase only marginal. Then when Buhari came in, it moved to somewhere around 400 naira, 400 to 500 naira per liter of fuel. And then Tinubu is there. As of this morning, I think Nigerians were complaining. So it's now between 1,000 naira and 1,200. 200. So it just keeps getting worse. And there's one single reason for that. The cartel's grip on the country is significant. And this cartel, as I've explained, cuts across. It will not matter who becomes president. The only president who will handle that is a president who is ready to go to war. And if you're not willing to fight, because sometimes, as President Reagan said here in the US, the best guarantee of peace sometimes is readiness for war, right? Okay, so corruption. And you must have heard of the interaction between Nigeria and corruption. But look, I'm a Nigerian who believes in the Nigerian people. I have fundamental problems about our country as it is currently constituted, but my belief in the Nigerian people is unshaken. So what you have heard about corruption is real, but it's explainable. In fact, when I was doing my first master's here in 2014 and 2015, there was a group of economists who recommended that since Nigeria could not successfully fight corruption, Nigeria should incorporate corruption as a strategy for business. So if you were an individual going into the country to try and do business, part of the costs you will have to calculate will be how much you pay in bribes, because it was not to promote efficiency. So instead of telling the hungry civil servant not to take bribes from you, give him bribe and let him do the work faster. They were calling it the benefits of corruption to the Nigerian. It wasn't that. Recommended by a group of economists because they couldn't fight it. But what is true is this. The Nigerian people, like people in many places, are decent. But they are also human. The Nigerian system is not created to serve the Nigerian citizen. So here in the United States, we're having that discussion some time ago. If you're hungry, like you are completely down on your luck, you won't starve. Except you don't know the route to the nearest food bank. Or some non-profits that's offering a free soup kitchen. Or some other person that will give you food for free. I know some of your neighbors who are a little more buoyant financially. In Nigeria, it's not that way. It's all man for himself. In America, and most parts of the developed West, if you want a car, you don't have to cough out $30,000 to buy a new Ford. You could just get any new car and take a monthly payment. So you can enjoy the car, you can use the car, you can get all the benefits of the car without the prohibitive cost of the total amount because of the advanced credit system, supported by the financial institution and the government. In Nigeria, you have to pay cash for everything you buy. You want to build a house, you've got to build it from the bottom up. Cash. You want a car, you've got to pay completely. Now, this is an economy of $254 billion. The US economy, by the way, in comparison, is $28 trillion. There are 333 million Americans. So the per capita is huge. Nigeria, in contrast, $252 billion. It's not even 1 trillion, $252 billion. And there are 220 million. doctors are very poor. That's very, very poor. If you divide 252 billion by 220 million, that will give you the per capita income for the average Nigerian. It should be somewhere under $1,000. So that's really, really poor. So that would explain why if you went to the office of a civil servant who earns less than $30, $30 is 70,000 naira, right? And that's the Nigeria's monthly minimum wage is 70 Nigerian naira, that's about $30. So if you go to an office where somebody earns $30,
they've not started paying.
they haven't even started paying. So you go to an office, somebody earns that. You have kids in school, they have to compete with their neighbors.
$30 per month.
It's per month, it's $30 per month. They have to compete with their neighbors, they have to get food, provide shelter, do all of that. On $30. Of course, that's not that. I mean, everybody in Nigeria pretends they don't know that that's not working. And that is why the underground system for corruption is very efficient. It's very smooth. Very, very smooth, because that's the only way people survive. But it is not the Nigerian people who are responsible for this. It is the Nigerian leadership. And I'll explain it this way. Nigeria has banks, like the United States does. Nigeria has a central bank, like the US has the Federal Reserve. All right? All monetary and fiscal policies are drawn from Nigeria's central bank. So the Nigerian central bank, which has access to massive liquidity, could integrate policies to create an efficient credit system. It's not rocket science. But the question is, why are they not doing that? Why haven't they done that? The reason they haven't done that is that since after the Nigerian Civil War, when the contest for power became very tough, whoever controls the center has access to most of the resources, the poverty of the Nigerian people became a political weapon. And this is a very, very stunning thing for those of you living here in America here, but I can assure you, if you go on YouTube and pull up elections in Nigeria, you're going to see Nigerians queuing up. When they want to vote, somebody will count some Naira notes, hand it to them, and then they'll cast their vote. The money that is supposed to be used to create that credit system goes to politicians to buy and retain power. And that's why we said when we started that the solution will be a transformational overhaul, one that does not look at faces, and one that is willing to level war on selected interests. Now, of course, we know what corruption was. My practice of law is international immigration, and very recently we were seeing a massive movement of Nigerian health professionals to countries outside of Nigeria, especially the United States and the UK. All right, we process a lot of those through our office, but the biggest firm in international immigration is called Henry & Partners. If you look at their data, and you're in Nigeria, you'll be concerned. If the current rate continues, it's more like Western health institutions are producing doctors and nurses through Nigerian universities. Once they finish training them, they work for like a year or two, get some experience, they're out of the country. So in response to that, the Nigerian government recently took what we called a policy steps. It said, oh, if you have not practiced for 5 years at least, we're not going to validate your registration for you to go and work outside. And we wrote them and said, no, that's not, they're not doing it because they hate the country or they don't want to treat Nigerians. They're doing it because in capitalism, labor will move to the place where it's going to get higher pay. It's as simple as that. If a skilled person has options A and B, they are just going to choose that option that will pay more for their skill. And that's precisely what is happening. Now, that flat is going to cripple Nigeria's health system in the next 5 years if something drastic is not done. As a matter of fact, you will go to a Nigerian hospital, all right? there's something Nigerians call gate man. Gate man is like a gatekeeper, somebody at the gate who opens the gate and all that. You won't find a doctor, but you find somebody who will open the gate for you and let you into the facility. A few years ago, and as recently as 10 years ago, in many Nigerian communities, you still had rural health centers, right? They used to call them primary health care facilities. So you go there for vaccinations, those things have all vanished. So in most rural communities, in fact, Nigerians who reside, and this is, I mean, for one majority of our people who reside in the rural communities are left to cater for themselves. Because even the cities are not seeing the healthcare professionals, let alone the rural communities. Infrastructure, another challenge. Nigeria is 64 years old. If you are new to Nigeria, if you haven't been to the country before, and you go in there, and you go to a place where you don't have electricity, the very first thing you notice is maybe around 7 p.m., once power is restored, you see Nigerian children, wherever they are, they just say, up NEPA. Even the adult Nigerians here, sometimes it is instinctive. Just say, up NEPA. NEPA is the Nigerian body, or used to be the Nigerian government agency in charge of electricity. All right? So because of how epileptic the power situation is, Nigerians consider it a privilege whenever power is given. So in response to that power, you see them shouting, oh, it's a good thing. And for 64 years, we have not figured that out. Not because we can't. Not because there are no brilliant engineers in Nigeria who will draw a power plant and fix the problem. But because, again, as I said, the poverty and underdevelopment of the Nigerian people is a political weapon. If you develop the country and you give the people power to create wealth, of which they are very capable, then your ability to manipulate them suddenly ceases. Then you have lost power. Many power brokers do not like that. And we're going to come to some of this, but that's a problem. Anyway, so the consequence of that is that in 2023 alone, all right, about 7 major multinational corporations exited the country. Jobs collapsed. Nigerian entrepreneurs, who are very brilliant, by the way, are unable to set up companies and efficiently run them. Look at this. This is a blessing in Nigeria. Then you take it for granted. When we came in here, I was trying to figure out where you had the switch. It was the Reverend Father over there who helped me figure that out. But in Nigeria, I'll be trying to get gas to run my jet so we can power my so we can have this. So it's a huge problem. Then every modern economy runs on power. Without energy, you can't do anything. You're basically useless. So for 220 million people, Nigeria produces less than 5,000 megawatts of electricity. 5,000 megawatts. And of the 5,000 megawatts, the distribution infrastructure can only handle less than 3,000 megawatts. Now, by contrast, South Africa was recently having problems with power as well, right? But South Africa, a country of, I think about 40 million people, their generating capacity is 45,000 megawatts. But because they haven't built, modernized their infrastructure to meet current demands, they have, those problems. But Nigeria, 220 million people, 5,000 megawatts. So you can't grow. That's a problem. Road infrastructure or transportation generally. In Nigeria, you have to, except you have money, you're rich, then you can go to any of Nigeria's major cities and take a local flight. Other than that, it is the road. Now, recently, the Nigerian government brought out, some modern rail systems that they bought from the Chinese, and they deploy those. But it's just so little that it has not dented the transportation problem that the country faces. So you have that huge gap between the massive production going on in agricultural communities, in farms, in rural areas, and then the cities where consumption takes place. So merely by solving that, connecting farms in communities with consumers in the city, you can create thousands of jobs and start to push back on poverty. Simple solution, right? Looks very, very simple. But the Nigerian politician will not do it. He would prefer to take the money for a contract, keep 70%, bribe people with 30%, and then share 10% during elections. Another problem is that even the available road infrastructure, all right? I don't know if you've gone through, I mean, most people here are Nigerians, so yes, you've gone through Nigerian roads. But for non-Nigerians who have gone through Nigerian roads, yes, the roads in Pittsburgh usually have potholes, right? It's a thing here, and I understand it's because of the weather, the roads stay clear on time. But in Nigeria, the potholes are actual potholes. One night I was driving from, I was driving between two Niger Delta states. Actually, I was moving from Delta State down to Imo State. Now, in that route, you have to cross Rivers State before you get into Imo State. I was driving at night, and the roads were not lit. The road had been cut in two, right? I guess by very quick erosion, because I think the road had been recently constructed. But the road had been cut. And there was this deep gash in the middle of the road, an exact death trap. But the road was not lit, and leading up to that place, everyone else was smooth. Now, the good thing was that the car I was driving in was, fairly new, and it was in pretty good condition. And I was driving very fast. I was very, very fast. So when I saw the division in the road, like a hole here, something, this is a little bit too wide, but if you move this a little, something like that, it was just that deep. Once I saw it, I was just too close to it to be able to slam on the brakes. So I just accelerated. And it paid off, because it was now, the front tire was able to get across that, but the back tire hit, the back tires, or the rear tires, hit the second edge of the hole, and I almost died that night. Now, thousands of Nigerians lose their lives that way on a daily basis. If you open up a Nigerian newspaper, you're likely going to see a shipping container from Lagos, like the Nigerian port in Lagos, all right, meandering through traffic and then falling off the trailer and onto a commuter bus. It happens too frequently for anyone to forget. So that's a problem as well. That's the problem with transportation infrastructure. All right, let me see. Education and human capital. We've talked about that. I've been to schools in many places. I've studied in Nigeria, I've studied here, I've studied in other places. America is leading the world because the United States does what most countries don't understand. People say, where's the money to fund education? Where are you going to get it from? Well, if you don't fund education, nothing else is going to work. So the US education system is essentially private sector driven. At least that's what most of us are meant to believe. But when you look deeper, you are going to see the influence of the American government. The Pell Grants, all the grants in billions of dollars given to universities, the tax system that allows billionaires to set up funds across universities and grants across universities and then claim those through taxes. And then the fact that the initial investment in American education infrastructure was made within the first 70 years of the country's history, and it has never gone back since then. And that is why, yes, the Chinese are coming, but if America maintains its pace in knowledge, it's going to continue to remain on top. And I'm sure you must have noticed that even the Chinese are sending a lot of their students to America to study. So, by contrast, in Nigeria, education is more like a privilege, right? I went to school in Nigeria, and the school I went to in Nigeria was considered, one of the best, I believe. But compared to how learning, takes place in other parts of the world, that is not nearly the case. And that's why whenever you see a Nigerian student here, you just pat them on the shoulder. They've gone through a lot to be able to come here. They've probably been able to read so much and develop themselves. Now, I'm sure you know that Nigerians are some of the most brilliant people you meet anywhere. They're very smart. So they can figure things out very, very quickly. But a classroom I once studied in Nigeria had 2,000 people. It was an amphitheater. It's like a concert hall. The professor was instructing from the front, somewhere in the middle. I could not hear one thing. Everything I learned in that course were things I had to study by myself. Now, not because there are libraries to give you the books. You got to find a way to buy them. Now, we have recommended that the Nigerian government must fund education as if it is the primary goal, because it is the primary goal. When you see a young Nigerian with a computer, and he's involved in internet scams, and he's trying to make a living, not a defense of the community, but that is what he's trying to do. The equivalent of that Nigerian is the young American who does, coding and software programming for Google, Facebook, TikTok, all of these, If you switch the venue and you brought that Nigerian here, his skills to manipulate people on the internet will be deployed to write programs for Fortune 500 companies, and it's going to make him very comfortable. More importantly, if he were to start up his own software company, there is no system on the ground in Nigeria that will help him develop and grow. So with education, access is a problem, the quality of education is a problem, there is no innovation. Since 1987, Nigeria has not reviewed its curriculum. So most of what Nigerian kids have learned through rote memorization are things that were required to service the colonial economy. I remember we were being trained essentially what to do if you got employed, not how you could create jobs or create your own employment. I mean, some schools are getting to talk about the central national curriculum that should be development driven. It's still not there. In fact, in Nigeria, kids are still being taught that a guy called Mongo Park discovered River Niger. When current historians have said, no, there were Nigerians living by the river. Nobody had to discover. They just want to visit. That's the proper interpretation of that history. The Nigerians and the white explorer met, and a beautiful union was created. Great relationship. But those Nigerians were discovered. And for their government to continue to teach them, 64 years after independence, that they were discovered, just tells you all you need to know about those management. And then finally, investment. And you have to invest. The United Nations, UNESCO, I think, the agency of the United Nations in charge of education, has recommended that you give at least 26% of your national budget to education, right? That's a basic minimum. So if you were to fall below, just mention, and if you were to fall below anything, just don't go below 26%. But for a country with massive educational gaps like Nigeria, we're saying that you need 40%, you need 50%, and you can do it. The Nigerian senator takes $13,000 monthly in both salaries and benefits. $13,000. Do your own calculation. The numbers are out there. They're not denied. They have what is called furniture allowance. They have allowance for their aides. They have to get new cars. Every time they leave office and somebody else comes into that office, they have to get entire new office furniture. Now, if they don't leave office and they are re-elected, the furniture they used in that office just before the election because they're not updated. They have to update it. So these levels of profligacy, which again are not sustainable, that's where all the money is going to. So if you cut that junk out and you bring the money in, you can fund education by 40% of national GDP, and the heavens will fall. Rather, the country will grow and rapidly develop. Healthcare challenges, great. I once went to a hospital in Nigeria, and they just have great doctors. Some of you work with them here, all right? But I once went to a hospital back home. I had pneumonia, and it was a very bad one for that. And somebody looked at me, a doctor looked at me, and he was medicating me for typhoid fever, which is simply what is a standard in Nigeria, right? When you go to a Nigerian hospital, if you have fever, you have headache, or you have cold, it's assumed that you have either typhoid or you have malaria. So that's the first prescription they're going to give you. Now, I was dying for almost a month, and actually about 6 weeks. All right, they kept giving those medications, and I kept falling sick. I became very misshapen until because I had an aunt who worked in one of the hospitals, a teaching hospital attached to the university, and she could speak to some higher up, and then a specialist was called, and then looked at me, did a few things, and made the proper diagnosis. And now I'm here talking to people who are alive. So the question is, how many Nigerians have died due to that poor diagnosis? We had a lot of cases in Nigeria that I had to look into where a Nigerian have died by medical malpractice. Here in the US, medical malpractice is actually a very big aspect of law. So any medical doctor has to be very careful in handling an American. In Nigeria, it's not so. As a matter of fact, there's one terrible incident that was published on Nigerian newspapers. The doctor was
Nigeria,
all right. I think they were supposed to
sue them, make
something that was
millions.
for the surgery inside the patient, right? Now, the patient died, and the hospital held back the costs and was trying to force the family to pay for the hospital. That's how sometimes the Nigerian people are dehumanized.
Mhm.
It is not health care in Nigeria. Nobody cares about Nigeria. All right? It is a Hobbesian state competition. It is nasty, it is brutish, and life there is short. So sometimes if you're going into a Nigerian hospital, you're praying that you're not picking up something worse than what took you there in the first place. So the healthcare standard, very terrible. Now, you also know that Nigerian nurses and doctors, sometimes they prioritize praying for you over giving you the truth. Prayers are great. Nigeria is a nation of faith, and we all love them. But sometimes, there's a general hospital somewhere in the United Delta that I wouldn't mention, because I was also involved in the litigation. The doctor was trying to practice what they were taught about faith healing in their church. The patient was due for a surgical procedure, and was supposed to be an emergency, but the doctor needed a testimony. So the doctor proceeded on fasting for the patient, and then started to pray. Asked the nurses to pray as well. And of course, the patient died.
Oh.
And then the family brought up the case. And the question was the man wrong in praying, or should he have
He was wrong
done
at
his
that
job as a
time.
doctor in addition to the prayers?
What is prayer?
So, but the man's approach in this case, as you would find out, is likely because of the problem with healthcare. Now, there's also a challenge with access. Not enough hospitals for the population that we have now. There are very few new hospitals that have been built in Nigeria since Nigeria became a democratic country in 1999. All right, most of the hospitals are still there. You're having some expansions here and there, but nothing major has happened. And then you have on the funding. In last year's budget, more money was committed to the president's kitchen. That's the amount that goes to feed the president. Renovation of the vice president's apartment, renovation of where the vice president will be. It's a house that's already established, but you just want to renovate it. And then the library of the president. More money went there than went to Nigeria's entire healthcare system. So the question we then ask is, are these people evil? I say, no, maybe they're not. Some of these guys are nice people. Right? Personally, they are nice people. As a young student activist, for example, when we were holding protests, sometimes we go into Lagos, all right, and we'll meet the current Nigerian president. Then he was an opposition leader, and he will have nice words for you, words of encouragement, support. So yeah, we don't think these guys are demons. There's going to be something in this constantly making them act against the interests of the Nigerian people. When they're in opposition, you see them make all these promises, and then somebody becomes president, and all of a sudden he wants to use $15 billion to renovate an apartment, a house. So it beats you. All right, we'll start to wrap this up here, so we can take questions and go to the panel. Opportunities now. I'll talk about the problems. So let's look at what does Nigeria offer. In everything I've said, I've mentioned that these are systemic problems. If you meet, I tell my friends who say, I want to go to Nigeria, they want me to fly into Lagos. As a matter of fact, as soon as you enter Nigeria's airspace, you notice that the energy has changed. There's light, there's some electricity in the air. Nigerians are not good. They're welcome, they're warm, they're nice people. They'll have you, they'll treat you very well. The kind of life their leadership has subjected them to is just unacceptable. If someone tells you that in Nigeria is a first side, the person is a liar. The Nigerian is trying to survive. He doesn't want to defraud you. He just wants to get something to eat. Now, I mentioned earlier that of the 220 million people, 60% of that number are under 30 years old. That's so many young people. Nigerians are also very innovative. How many of you know Calendly? Calendly is an American scheduling service set up by in Nigeria. It's worth about $3 billion. So what is true is that once Nigerians leave the restricting space of Nigeria and they are placed in an environment where you have opportunities, they just thrive. They take it. So if you are somebody who's thinking of fixing Nigeria's problems or thinking of setting up a business in Nigeria, and you're looking at Nigeria, you're asking yourself, what are the opportunities there? First of all, you're going to have a teeming set of young people. I think you're going to have very well educated, very, very educated to help you fix your problems. Nigerians are also very, very entrepreneurial. All right? Nigerians can anything at all. When some of you were coming here, the venue was a little bit difficult to locate. If a Nigerian had found that out yesterday, he would have printed flyers showing directions and he would sell it for $5. Nigerians are very entrepreneurial. As a matter of fact, sometimes in Lagos, Nigeria's major economic hub, when it rains and you have flood, all right, and you want to cross